Let's now take a look at the behavior of propagandists on social media. As we previously discussed, social media has been used as a conduit for propaganda for more than 10 years, including here in the United States. Social media is an efficient conduit for quickly spreading information to many people. And on Twitter, the posting patterns of users who sometimes spread propaganda bear certain hallmark characteristics, as we've discovered in some of our own research. Often, the users who spread this information tweet in very high volumes over short periods of time. They exhibit a high ratio of retweets to original content. There's often a short time between the original post and the retweet. And there's often collusion or coordination with other users who are disseminating and resharing the same posts. Those four characteristics, high volume, high retweet ratio, fast retweets, and collusion, are characteristics that we observed in a study that we performed way back in 2010 and 2011 by studying propaganda around a Nevada Senate race and the debt ceiling debate that took place in Congress in 2011. You can see here that both of these events exhibited characteristics where a hashtag would trend or increase in tweet volume over a short period of time and taper off after the passage of the event. We observed some other characteristics, including that a small number of users or a small fraction of the overall users are responsible for the vast majority of the posts. And we also saw that users who tend to post more on one side of the spectrum or another exhibit characteristics of retweeting much more quickly than users who have a more neutral orientation. In his book, Network Propaganda, Yochai Benkler studies similar phenomena. Here, he looks at the media ecosystem according to the media sources that are linked to the most. The data shown here is from 2016. You can see that the usual suspects of media sites are towards the top of the list as far as media inlinks are concerned. In his visualizations, he's also laid out the graph nicely from left to right according to where users who are sharing those particular sources orient along the political spectrum. His book describes in more detail how he orients users along the political spectrum, but it relates to how those users post or retweet content from political figures on either side of the spectrum. During the 2016 election, there was concern that social media, and in particular bots on social media, were overtaking discourse through the means of propaganda and diverting user attention towards an alternate set of media sources. To test that hypothesis, Benkler and his colleagues looked at a similar graph in terms of the sources that were shared on social media. Here's the same plot showing the media sources most frequently shared on Twitter and how they orient in the political spectrum. In his study, Benkler concludes, in fact, that the set of sources we see in social media don't diverge all that much from the set of sources one sees linked to in regular media, indicating that despite the concern about bots on social media, the sharing and posting behavior of bots on social media during the 2016 election didn't significantly divert user attention to a completely distinct set of sources. In summary, propaganda is an old concept, long predating social media, but social media has lowered the barrier to spreading propaganda. Propaganda on social media itself dates back at least a decade, and I showed one example of a study we did almost a decade ago looking at the behavior of users who spread propaganda on social media. Over time, the rise of both automated and human bots has exacerbated this problem, and the study we performed almost a decade ago certainly warrants repeating. That study observed that sometimes propagandists have telltale behaviors. And yet, as we saw from Benkler's study, the downstream effects are not always completely understood. Despite the presence of propagandists and bots in social media during the 2016 election, the sources that users were exposed to don't appear to have differed dramatically on social media versus the sources that they might have seen in mainstream media. But That analysis merely scratches the surface because it only looks at the set of sources. It doesn't look at particular content, news articles, and what other things people might have been seeing in the long tail of sources and information that's shared on social media.